Good morning. We're going to get started with Sorted Out, our session for this morning. Thanks for all those of you coming out at 9 a.m. Give a few people. So my name's Tim Duimati. I work for Napa Recycling and Waste Services, and we've put this panel together. There's a lot of nuances to this issue of MRF contamination, residue, and how it fits in with the state of the markets and kind of where to go from there. And we wanted to we're going to give our presentations, and then hopefully we'll have a nice amount of time for a discussion at the end, because maybe you have some other things you want to bring up, and also then we can kind of make it collaborative, because the point isn't to just complain about things that are happening, but also to come up with solutions, right? So we're going to kind of get going with it, and I'm going to give a little overview, and then we'll have some more folks on the panel to talk about MRFs and kind of what's happening with the operations at the MRFs with contamination, and really what that is, and to kind of get everybody on the same page, because it's really an issue. And I put the closed loop system up there because that's really our goal, right? And actually, if you think about sorting recyclables, there's all these places in that loop that we can lose material. And I think sometimes we think, once it gets into the blue cart, it's been recycled. But the reality isn't that, and there's a lot of things we'll get into about that, but let's try to make it so that we can close that loop. So this is who we are. So we're a private hauler, work in the city of Napa and Napa County, and we're also the operator of the city of Napa's facility. And so we haul material and we process it, which is nice because we kind of get to see the material that we collect and then process it. And we have a partnership with the city of Napa. Kevin Miller just walked in. And a lot of our, our processing and our material sales are all shared. So it's kind of a shared partnership between the city and our company. And this is just our facility. We'd love to have people come visit. If you've never been to a MRF and a compost facility, you get 2 for 1 at our site. And we're kind of mid-sized so a lot of, the city of Napa is about 80,000 people. We also process material from other jurisdictions. So we go through about 120,000 tons a year, and that's split between recycling and composting. So that building right there, we're going to talk about the MRF. We're not talking about the composting today, but you can see the MRF back there. We'd love it if it were bigger, but we have the building that we have, and we're going to kind of go through the processing issues and hopefully some solutions. So our sorting line, single stream recycling, this is kind of where we were, where this idea for this panel first came from, is that I noticed when we were doing reporting, we were getting about almost twice as much residue, right? So we're going to hear contamination and residue, and everybody kind of has, what does that mean? So residue is what the material that we were throwing in the landfill at the end of the process. And, part of that had to do, there's a lot of reasons. Part of it had to do with the markets going down, and we couldn't send that material off the end of the sort line to a secondary processor. And so you hear the term secondary MRF, and that's a MRF, a materials recovery facility that's taking another's kind of stuff that came off the end and resorting it to kind of get the stuff that wasn't captured the first time around. Well, the markets, when the prices for commodities dropped, a lot of those outlets went away. And so it wasn't worth sorting our leftovers anymore. And that's where we were incurring additional costs of disposal, but also we were losing out on diversion from this material. One of the other things is that, and this is something that's happened to a lot of MRFs, is that we haven't built that many, but we're processing more tons. And a lot of it's commercial tons, and that makeup is different from residential. And we're mixing it together, and we're sorting it on these sort lines. And we have, at our facility, getting on towards almost twice as much as when it first became operational. And it's kind of hard to deal with that without having some additional material that doesn't get caught in the process. I put the evolving ton in there because that's one of those things that you really have to realize too, is that materials have really changed. The plastics are one of those things that have become more complicated and more ubiquitous. And then just the fact that there's twice as much cardboard and half as much newspaper is significant. And that's the Amazon boxes. And that just kind of changes how you have to process material on a sorting line. And then just facilities aging out and not keeping up with technology. So all this stuff we're kind of dealing with this material, this waste out of our recycling. And you wonder, is it people putting the wrong things in the bin, or things that they think are recyclable, or is it really a processing? It's both, and that's kind of what we're getting to. It's all of the above, and just understanding that, I think, is going to be critical for all of us to solve this. So there's a couple examples in the news lately. I just noticed these. One of these was in San Jose, where there was a 40% contamination rate, which was in their single-stream recycling. And I just kind of put this picture up there because, that pile behind Joel from CWS, that is not 40% contaminated. So to me, seeing that means that they're not capturing a lot of recyclables for some reason at their sorting line. And the fact that it was 40% contamination kind of muddied what the problem was, because it wasn't just people throwing garbage in the recycling, which is happening, but it's a combination of all these factors that go into it. This was a picture I took from the Mercury News article, and it was just kind of examples of what they were seeing in their bins. But to me, that's a missed opportunity, right? Because somebody could have washed that can out and recycled it and composted the stuff that was inside. So you kind of, when you start to look into this and you sort of see there's solutions, but there are very different solutions, and they're not always the same. And kind of just sort of looking at, what they were seeing in their bins, there is additional education for the confused public that needs to happen. This was Sonoma County, and in their MRFs, which they stopped taking some of these sort of fringe items recently, like consolidated plastic bags, shredded paper, pizza boxes. And I kind of I saw this picture in their article, and I was like, oh my God, they have way too much material going across their processing line at once. And of course they can't pull out all the recyclables. It's just an overloaded line. And so there's just a lot of these things that it's not just people throwing garbage in the recycling. It's a lot of issues. And I thought these were very interesting things to see in these newspaper articles, because I think they were kind of putting it on a simple answer, but it isn't that. So Peter Sloat actually came up with this matrix, and this is when we were talking about this, and it's really, what is contamination? And it's not one thing, right? It's something different to us as a hauler, and then as a processor, and then it's something different to the end user of our material, right? So when they take our plastic bottles, they need to remove the labels and throw the labels away. Well, that's a contaminant to them, but it wasn't a contaminant to us in the first place. So, and we could potentially sell a load of recyclables, but maybe it was contaminated and it compromises the end use down the line. And these are all breaks in the loop, and so we're trying to avoid any of these things. So the idea of contamination is something that evolves between the end users. So I put 3 pictures up here because I wanted to show people kind of what we're dealing with, and kind of what we're seeing and what the different materials are. So this is actually MRF over. So this is the stuff I was talking about that comes off the end of our sorting line, and this was a particularly highly recyclable pile I took a picture of. But this is the stuff that that was either going to get secondary sorted at a secondary MRF or is going to go to the landfill because we couldn't handle it the first time around. And one of our another MRF in the Bay Area, one of our partner companies, Garaventa in Contra Costa County, actually built a MRF that didn't have an end. It was a continuous loop. And so all the material would just go around until somebody positively pulled it off of the sort line. Well, they had to change that because they had to just add an end into it, because what was happening was that just material would just spin around in little tiny things, would just be on it forever, and you couldn't pull those off. So there's a reason we have screens and things that mechanically remove items, but that downside to that is that you miss things. And so there's 80% recyclables in the stuff that goes off the end of our sorting line. And this is different from the contaminants that we pull off, like the bags of garbage or moldy stuffed animals at the beginning. This is the stuff at the end, the residue. All right, what's that pile? That's single stream recycling. So that's the stuff when it comes in the first place. And, the things that they have to remove, like the plastic bags, the different materials, and also like just things we do to help make our material high value, like we pull out whole glass bottles. But this is the stuff that we're dealing with, and it's just moving by on a conveyor belt. And the idea that you'd be able to capture every single thing is hard. It's when you're dealing with your sorters having to look at that materials. And then this is mixed glass, right? So you see this right at MRFs. You have single stream recycling. You have stuff that goes through a screen, and this goes to a glass recycler. And so you think it's like, well, it didn't end up as our contamination, but they have a lot of contamination that they have to remove. And what's it, like a lotion bottle? I don't know if it's like a cantaloupe rind over there. A lot of corks and bottle caps. They do recycle the metal, but everything else is going to be landfilled out of there that's not glass. I saw this picture in an email that got sent to me, and I thought it was pretty good because it's true. Like, we get questions as recycling, staff that we don't even know how to answer them. So imagine like the public trying to figure out what to do with certain things. And so I think the challenge is to be able to have a clear message, but also the right message. And so this was a picture that I got emailed to me from a customer. And, hey, I got this stuff. It's not styrofoam. I can put it in my recycling bin, right? Well, yeah, if you can't read that sign on there, it's like, this is PET foam. And please place me in your curbside bin. I am fully recyclable at your community recycling center. I don't know of anybody that would sort out PET foam for recycling because is there a market for PET foam? How much PET foam would we be getting? This is all going to go in the landfill, but it just has this label on it that is really, truth in labeling I put up there. It's misleading and it confuses people. I'm not going to read this to you, but this kind of gets to my point of I got a question from I run this, there's this column in this community online newsletter, and they ask me questions called a compost corner. And you end up with a question like this, was like, what about bottle caps? And I end up with a 5-paragraph treatise about bottle caps. Well, if it's plastic, put it on the bottle, and if it's metal, take it off. And if it's a plastic cap on a weird paper carton, well, I don't know what to do with that. This is like just muddying people's minds and making them confused. And if we call it contamination, we're not really giving them a fair break, right? We need to have easy answers for them. So I put some of the other things at the bottom, like I was talking about this with a few of you at this conference, like, what about that kind of rigid plastic container that my Trader Joe's ravioli comes in? And is that rigid or is that film? And maybe Patty will tell us later, but she probably doesn't even know. So this is the weird stuff that we have to deal with, and it ends up, a little bit of it sort of adds up over time, and we end up with all this stuff in our mix of recyclables. So we're going to get into more detail on the solutions, and I just outlined a few of them here. Obviously new technologies and upgrades at MRFs, secondary MRFs, which will get mentioned some more, additional sorting after these primary MRFs, and then also PERFs, which are plastics recycling facilities that will sort mixed plastics. Market assistance and that kind of being able to properly fund recycling so that we can sort out and upgrade materials so they have a use, because it's too cheap to landfill. Because that's really what happens, right, is that it becomes prohibitively expensive for us to sort more, so we end up sending it to the landfill. Outreach, and that I put a picture of Oakland's outreach, which is nice and simple. And I think we have to strive to be as simple as we can, except we have to have some method to get the details to people when they have a specific question. So it's a sort of multiple tiered outreach. I just kind of threw that last one on there, do we start telling people to compost any small paper under 2 inches? Because that's really, it wouldn't be captured on the sort line because it'll end up with the glass. So I don't know, that was just a thing that I was thinking about. Do we have to change, how we manage materials to be more in line with the realities? These are just a couple of things that we've done to kind of help out on our end. And I've noticed in our programs, adding the full food composting program has helped complete the message on paper. So everybody there's an answer for every type of paper. It's either it goes in the compost or it goes in the recycling, if it's dirty or if it's clean. And that helped get rid of a lot of the contamination of paper towels and paper plates, which people always put in the recycling. And now at least there's another place for that to go. Our plastic bag ban helped us because it removed 50% of the plastic bags out of our stream overnight, and then we didn't have to sort those out, so it helped us with the rest of our sorting. And then just upgrading our conveyor belts has helped us save 100 tons a month in the last few months. So those are just things that we've done incrementally to help. So we're going to get to the discussion afterwards, but that's my kind of overview, and then we're going to bring up Susan Collins from the Container Recycling Institute, and she's going to get into it some more right here. So thanks.
I can pause for a moment here and allow the people in the back to find seats. It won't bother me at all if you want to shuffle in. And maybe if you have an empty seat next to you, can you raise your hand? Do you guys want to sit down and be more comfortable? I'm amazed that this room is full. Thank you all for coming, 9 a.m. I appreciate it. Yes, I'm Susan Collins. We're sort of doing self-introductions. I'm with the Container Recycling Institute. I've been with CRI for 7 years. The organization is celebrating its 25th anniversary this year. And before that, I was with consulting firms here in California, working mainly for municipalities for about 20 years. I guess I should be truthful because this will probably come across in the way that I present information. I'm an engineer with an MBA concentrating on finance, so I tend to talk about data and statistics. In any case, this is what I strive to do every day. It's what we strive to do every day at the Container Recycling Institute. We have a focus on packaging materials. We have a focus on North America, even though the work that we do is sometimes worldwide. But we want to know, how can we collect the most packaging materials at the highest quality and at the lowest cost? That's recycling nirvana. That's what we're all hoping to achieve. And when I say at the highest quality levels, the importance there is that the goal of recycling, the promise of recycling, is to have these materials replace virgin materials in the manufacturing process. That's how we achieve the greenhouse gas savings, the toxics reduction, and the energy savings. That's what we're going for with recycling. Anything else is just driving the stuff around or driving it to another destination, but we're not going to achieve those upstream environmental benefits unless we're producing really high quality material that can replace virgin material in the manufacturing process. I think I just got ahead of myself here. So weight is not an indication of environmental footprint. Every ton of aluminum that we recycle is 10 times more greenhouse gas reducing than a ton of paper that we recycle. When you look at beverage containers, even though they're only 5% by weight in the waste stream, they are 20% of the divertible material stream if you look at it in terms of greenhouse gases. So we've had a weight-based focus for a really long time, but we need to think about the environmental benefits that we're really trying to achieve. And of course, our greenhouse gas productions come from the production of our stuff. So anything we can do to reduce our stuff is going to go to the red section of this pie chart. That's where we're producing greenhouse gases in the U.S. And I just say all of these things at the beginning of every presentation I give. 10 times a year I give these presentations at different conferences around the country. But it's just so helpful for us to refocus ourselves and remember that this is what we're doing. We're trying to replace virgin materials. And this is just an example of how recycled content does that. I just picked a material, in this case it's PET, but as you use more recycled content in the product, you're dropping the greenhouse gases. That's all this is meant to demonstrate. So we've done research over the years on single-stream recycling and looked at the contamination levels from the materials coming out of that. This is the cover of a report that we did in 2009, and it's on our website, which is container-recycling.org. And we have an entire page dedicated to this subject that includes not only our research, but the research of other organizations as well. So a lot of good material there. What we found after doing that study, this was the key question I wanted to answer. If you collect 100 tons of material at the curb, how many tons are going to be made into a usable product at the end of the day? And the answer is 75. Now I'm going to repeat the fact that I'm an engineer. An efficiency level of only 75% is not good. And anybody who studies processes, who studies logistics, I come from a world of studying, Six Sigma. You don't want 75. That's not the number you're going for. You're going for something that's like 99.99% efficiency. So we can do way better than this. And I've done preliminary calculations on how much contamination costs us to deal with, to handle in the United States. And it's at least $1 billion a year. That's without going into depth on my calculations. So we're spending a crazy amount of money to get results that we don't want. Let's fix this. Tim already talked about 3 stages of contamination. It starts with contamination happens when people put the wrong thing in the bin. Contamination happens when materials get cross-contaminated at the MRF. And they come out either in the residue pile, or the 3rd stage of contamination where it really gets cleaned up is at the secondary processor. Because at that point, they're making a product that has to fit very tight specifications so that they can sell it to a manufacturer who's going to use it to make new products. And I want to just throw this idea out there, get the wheels turning in your minds about entropy. Think about the natural process of how contamination increases as we have more material types. Let's say you had 3 material types, and 5% of each material type was cross-contaminating into the other one. That would give you a certain amount of contamination in each of those material types, right? Just increase it to 10 material types and think about how much more contamination that creates. Every time you add in a new material type, that's going to happen. Tim mentioned the evolving ton. I've got some slides on it. We're increasing the number of material types. It is natural that we will increase cross-contamination as a result. More photos. This is deposit versus single-stream glass. This was one of the first tours of a facility that I did when I started at Container Recycling Institute. And I saw the pile on the left, and I knew that that was whole bottles that came from buyback centers. And I saw the pile on the right, and I thought that was their residual pile that was going to landfill. And the facility operator said, "No, that's glass." And I said, "What?" And he took his steel-toed boot and ran it through the pile, and it went tingle, 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 tingle. And I realized there was actually glass in there that I couldn't see. And in all fairness, it is because the lighter stuff kind of floats to the top as it's en route. So you see a lot of paper and bottle caps. And when you get deeper into the facility, you also see a lot of chicken bones and dental floss picks. But that is what it looks like when it arrives at the glass beneficiation facility, and then they have to run it through a lot of really expensive equipment in order to clean out all the junk that isn't glass in order to make a usable product that they can sell either to a glass bottle manufacturer or a fiberglass insulation manufacturer. So 40% of the stuff gets sorted out, and of course any process of decontamination, any process of cleaning it out, you're going to have collateral damage. You're going to take out some of the good stuff with the bad because it's just part of the sorting process. You have to err on the side of taking out some of the good glass that you do want to make sure that you're producing glass that's clean enough. And that's true for glass and paper and all the other products. So here's incoming material at a paper mill. And to be fair, I was photographing the edges of the pile where I was seeing things, so the entire pile doesn't look like this. But we can see a lot of film plastic and container plastic, for example, in this picture. Here you can also see an aluminum can. And now This is what it looks like when the material goes to landfill. So it all goes into some sort of a pulper. There's different kinds of pulpers at different kinds of paper mills. But that means water is being added to the process. The paper fiber is being turned into pulp, pushed through screens, and what's ever big gets caught by those screens and gets filtered out to go to the landfill. And you can't separate it out at that point. It's all a mixture of mush. It's mixed in with that paper sludge. And it's also taking out the collateral damage of that good paper sludge. That good paper sludge could have been made into paper, but instead it was stuck to these items. So it's a triple tragedy, because you can see, maybe not in this photo, but I think in the next one, aluminum cans, maybe not. I'll back up. Any case, there's a lot of aluminum cans in there too. 1 out of every 6 aluminum cans that goes through a single stream MRF ends up in the load it's not supposed to, and a lot of that is the paper. So the consumer who put their thing in the bin wanted that aluminum can to be recycled. And the aluminum industry certainly wants it to be recycled. It goes to the paper mill, and the paper mill pays good money to get stuff that they don't want, and then they pay good money again to filter out this stuff that they don't want and send it to the landfill, all the while missing all the opportunity to recycle the plastics and the aluminum that comes in with their paper, and they miss perfectly good paper, and this stuff is now wet. So it weighs that much more, and they have to pay that much more at the landfill. I mean, it's bad on a lot of fronts. So the losses there end up being 18%, and this is how we arrived at the overall 25%, is that we looked at the losses both at the material recovery facility and then farther down the stream at how much were the losses at paper, how much were they at glass, how much were they at plastic, et cetera, and ran all the numbers together. And then these are just a couple of slides. I'm going to show you different material types. The point here is just to see that each material type has a variety of things that are showing up as contaminants in those bales. So this is aluminum, this is PET, this is HDPE. So these are recent bale sorts that were done in the state of California by CalRecycle. And then I showed this slide because what this is meant to show is just that it's getting worse over time. This is from NAPCOR's data, and NAPCOR has told that story in each of their annual reports. Yes, there's contamination. No, it's not getting better. As a matter of fact, it's getting worse. So you can see at the top is their recycling rate. That's the amount they take in at their facilities. And the bottom is the utilization rate. That's the amount that they are actually able to sell. And there's a number of things causing the two lines to be separate, and some of it's just what's attached to the bottle itself. I see a Dasani bottle there, and there's a label on it and a cap, and of course those things need to be, the cap, label, and glue all need to be filtered out before they make their PET pellets or flake or whatever. So there's some of it that's inherent in the process that's because it's attached to the container, and that's fine, but then there's also other stuff that is truly contamination that's arriving in these loads. But again, you can see that the two lines were running sort of parallel for a while, and now they're spreading farther apart, and that's because there's increasing contamination. So the other thing that's happening at the same time, we have increasing contamination, we have the evolving ton, and the cost per material type and the evolving ton are connected, and they're causing costs to rise. The key here, these are peer-reviewed, audited data from the province of Ontario. So this is the best data set I've ever found on the cost per material type from anywhere around the world. And you can see that the lighter items are the ones that are the most expensive to recycle. Most of the cost of recycling comes in the transportation piece. It's the collection of materials from the homes getting to the material recovery facility. That's about 75% of the cost. The rest of it is in processing, and then of course there's the revenue that comes from selling the materials. These are the net costs. So you can see that the heavier items generally have the lower net costs, and it is a myth that glass is super expensive to recycle, but if you look at the whole system, glass comes in at about $135 a ton compared to the plastics, which are up in the $600 to $2,000 range. And as we move more of our materials up into those lighter items, the average cost per ton goes up. So that's another thing the industry is experiencing right now. And then there's the tragedy of the declining scrap values. You don't have to read every word or study these slides. Just notice that the lines are going in the downward direction. So what we need to do is move to cleaner collection methods. And the places that I see around the world that have cleaner collection methods are not facing the same level of crisis that we're experiencing here in California. So one of those, of course, is deposit return programs. There are 45 of these programs around the world. And they collect really clean material, like the glass bottles that I showed you in one of those first slides. Also, the recycling rates for beverage containers in deposit states are 2 to 3 times as high as recycling rates for beverage containers in non-deposit states. Beverage container deposit return programs also dramatically reduce litter, cut it in half in Hawaii within a couple of years of introduction. And that's sort of self-evident to anybody who's ever seen somebody wandering around picking up beverage containers off of the sidewalks. But what's been happening in California, I can tell you in 5 numbers what the recent trend is with our beverage container redemption centers. Because of the underpayment process, which I'm not going to talk about in this presentation, but I can give you information on, or you can get it from our website if you want to understand the cause of this. But the result is we have seen 800 centers close since 2013. That is 31% of our state's infrastructure. It is not spread evenly across the state. So from San Francisco northward, they've really suffered tremendously from the loss of redemption centers. The redemption centers have been underpaid in the last 4 years, a total of $50 million. So, of course, that explains why 800 of them have gone out of business. And that means also, if we assume that there's 2 jobs per center, that's a loss of 1,600 jobs statewide at the very least. And we should all know that this program returns $1 billion worth of nickels to consumers around the state. So all of those consumers that aren't able to get their nickels back are losing collectively millions of dollars out of this program, and it's sort of turned the program into a tax for them. You should all know that the reason that this relates to what we're talking about today with contamination is that the vast majority of the tonnage that moves through that system is glass. So it's this container deposit return program is keeping, I can't remember exactly, it's hundreds of thousands of tons of glass are not going into material recovery facilities. They're instead going through the container deposit system and being returned through the system in a cleaner way. So the other thing that's happening as a result of the centers closing is that it pushes the population to the centers that remain. And that means that those centers are getting more and more overcrowded. So this is how I've tracked it on the population served by each redemption center in California. California always has had the least convenient return system in terms of population served of any of the 45 programs in the world. So this only exacerbates the situation. Now we're up to the point where 22,000 people, or 22,000 in population, are served by each redemption center. So this really, really, really needs to be fixed. There was a great piece on the Daily Show once during the financial crisis where the man said that he had 3 words for his government: fix it, fix it. And that needs to happen here with this container deposit program. Obviously, it's unconscionable to let more centers close. We know that 8 more of them have closed in the last few weeks. So CalRecycle and the administration really need to do the right thing right now, immediately, and increase the payments. So here's more solutions that keep material cleaner so that it can actually be recycled in the way that we want it to be recycled. This is a picture of the dual stream carts that they use in Sunnyvale. You can see the cart on the right has 2 lids, so the paper fiber material is on one side, and the containers are on the other side, meaning plastic, metal, and glass. And as a result, and this is a terrific photo. I don't know how they got the camera inside the truck to take this picture. But that's what it looks like from inside the truck and the way that it's loaded. Here's an example in Germany where they do public collection of glass. You guys might have also heard of the very popular program that Ripple Glass has established in the Kansas City area. Separate collection of glass is an absolutely fantastic way to get good, clean material and to keep all the glass out of everything else. It's like the Reese's peanut butter commercial, for those of you who are old enough to remember it, where the two guys run into each other and the chocolate gets into the peanut butter and the peanut butter gets into the chocolate. It was good for Reese's, not good for recycling. So as we seek new policies to increase recycling rates, we need to start reporting what is actually recycled, not just what is collected for recycling. And generally in this country, we report on collection rates, which is, it hits a moment of stupidity when you realize that after the material then goes to the landfill, you count it again. So we're double counting material that has been recycled, but it wasn't really, and then we count it again when it goes to the landfill. Recommendations that municipalities should know what's really being recycled. You should receive reports not only from your material recovery facility on what the throughput was at that facility, but what the losses were at the secondary facilities. And most material recovery facilities are already receiving those reports from their paper mills and from their, they're getting feedback from their secondary processors. And that feedback needs to also go to the municipalities so that the municipalities can also better communicate and better design their programs. Further study of collection economics, the cost per ton collected number isn't the important number. Again, think of the factory or the manufacturing analogy. You wouldn't talk about your cost per widget if 50% of your widgets were rejects. You would talk about your cost per widget sold. And if you could only sell 50% of them, then that's a different cost number than throughput. Throughput is sort of silly. And then we need to also research best practices, which is certainly something we're doing at CRI so that we can share more good information with more of you folks. More recommendations, and I think I'm probably running out of time. It feels like I'm running long. So I'll do these quickly. I've been suggesting for a couple of years that more of this new language, this new way of thinking, be added to contracts. And a couple of cities seem to be doing this. The city of Los Angeles has a new process underway. They want facility certification so that they know what the actual throughput is of those facilities and how much of it is usable material. And that makes all the sense in the world. If you have two different MRF operators and you're a municipality, and they're both telling you that they're going to achieve the same thing, but one of them is actually more efficient at cleaning the materials than the other one is, you need to know that. As a buyer, you need to know what you're paying for. And these are contract definitions from Santa Fe. So Santa Fe, New Mexico, tried to incorporate this language into their most recent RFP for collection and processing for curbside recyclables. So it's kind of new. We don't know exactly what the feedback is on how this process is working for them, but that's examples of at least two municipalities that I know of that are really trying to follow their materials all the way through and find out how much is really being recycled. So to get more information, these are ways that you can contact us. And I think that's all I've got for today. Thank you.
Alrighty. I don't have a PowerPoint. You're just going to have to listen. Sorry. So my name's Patty Moore with Moore Recycling. I've been in the industry 30 years and have specialized in plastic recycling mostly, but my focus recently has been shifting more towards sustainable materials management because after all this time in this industry, I've realized that while recycling is fantastic, and I am a huge supporter of it, it is not going to get us where we need to go because hopefully you'll agree with me by the time I'm done, not to say we shouldn't recycle. So why do we recycle? I think that we heard the real reason. I hear people say, to keep stuff out of the landfill. Really? No. To make, if you get nothing else out of what I have to say today, what I would like to tell you is that the true benefits of recycling are not about about disposal avoidance. There are very little benefits of recycling in disposal avoidance. The true environmental benefits are upstream when we replace virgin materials. You heard that now from 2 speakers, okay? Really important to keep that in mind. So that means that recycling lives and dies. It's our reason for being here, why we care about this, lives and dies by the markets, right? And I heard a really wise person say, and I don't know who the original quote of this is that we do not sell recyclables. None of us in this room sell recyclables. Someone buys them, okay? So starting with that same thing as you, it's funny, we did not collaborate on this. We're starting exactly the same place. But I want to talk about why we're seeing this changing waste stream. So there's been a global emphasis, less in the U.S. actually, but more global emphasis on emissions, greenhouse gas emissions reductions. So it's really been that change and emphasis on greenhouse gas reduction that has changed the material mix. There's been a strong movement to lighter weight materials, more efficient packaging, and rightly so, okay? Let me give you some examples why we've moved that way. One is an EPA example on EPA's website that has 3 kinds of 1 pound of coffee. Some of you may have seen this. They have a pound in a steel can, they have a pound in a plastic jug, and they have a pound in a vacuum-packed multi-layer. Right? And they show the environmental impact of those from energy, material use, and waste. And basically what it shows that even if we recycle 100% of those first 2, the steel container and the plastic jug, we will still have more resource use than if we don't recycle any of the vacuum-packed multi-layer, okay? Lower energy use, lower material use, lower greenhouse gas emissions, right? So the private sector, which has this pressure on them to reduce greenhouse gas, they figured this out. Well, then we can shift. We need to shift to lower impact things. Another example, I was talking to a buyer at Walmart, or a packaging guy at Walmart, a buyer and packager, okay? And he got a bonus because greenhouse gas emissions is important to Walmart because it's important to their customers. He got a bonus if he could meet greenhouse gas reduction goals. He told me that he made 1 packaging change and was able to meet his goals with 1 packaging change 1 year, and that was to shift from baby car seats in cardboard boxes, right, and instead put them in plastic bags, right? And he said, not only did I get more of them on the truck, they were lighter weight. My customers, I got more on the shelf too, which is important, shelf space, and my customers liked it better because they could see what they were buying, right? A win. So we went from something that was recyclable to something that is readily recyclable to something that's more difficult to recycle. Yet, it reduced greenhouse gases. Another example, sorry, I like examples. There was a United Nations Environmental Program publication in 2014 that was done by a company called TrueCost. And what it did was it put a valuation on plastic, a dollar figure, on the costs that companies would incur if the damage caused by waste plastic were included in their accounting. Full cost accounting, you can call it, internalizing externalities, in many ways to call that. So the results were really disturbing, as you might imagine. $13 billion in cost to the marine ecosystem and $75 billion in overall costs of consumer goods. Yet, a new study was just released by TrueCost using the same methodology that shows that the environmental cost of using plastics is nearly 4 times less than if those plastics were replaced by other materials. Right? So what we have to realize is that we are going to create pollution. We are going to have whether we want to or not. Just by breathing, we're creating pollution, right? When my first my economics teacher in grad school told us that. He's like, we as human beings pollute. He says, even if I dig a hole and kill myself and fall in the hole, he says, I still left a shovel there and it polluting, okay? So what we have is trade-offs. We have trade-offs that we are going to have to be a lot more thoughtful about. And so that's basically why we're seeing this dramatic shift to a lighter weight stream in our packaging, because it makes economic and environmental sense, and it reduces greenhouse gas use, energy use, material use, okay? So now what are we going to do about that? Except for OCC, which is Amazon, but we'll set that one aside, okay? So let's see, where was I? Let me get caught up here. Okay, so unfortunately, as you mentioned, most of the MRFs, this shift has happened very quickly in the last 5 years. Most of the MRFs were not built to deal with what we're dealing with now, right? And so clearly we need to modify our MRF system. So I'm going to set that aside just for a second and come back to it, okay? We also need to modify, as you pointed out, I just love this, it's great. I swear we didn't collaborate, that the California public policy has not kept up with our changing waste stream, right? According to EPA's greenhouse gas emissions data from 2006, if we were able to recycle essentially everything, close to everything that's possible to recycle, right? The greenhouse gas emissions that we produce would be reduced by 6%. Okay? 6% is great. 6% would be something. But look at all that leaves. That leaves a huge amount of material. And that's because the vast majority of the impacts that we have on this planet are upstream, not downstream. It's not end of life. And that's why EPA is really looking at sustainable materials management and reduction. And I guess we have a plenary this afternoon or late after this and I'm really looking forward to hearing what they have to say about that. Hopefully they'll collaborate what I'm saying here. So we need to address the upstream impact. Yet here in California, we are stuck with a 75% recycling goal by weight, right? So we have this goal that does not match what I like to think, hopefully all your environmentalists out there, needs and goals are, okay? We're stuck with this by weight thing, which just is illogical and doesn't really make sense. And why are we there? We're there because we're using attributes as proxies for impacts. Okay? So let me explain what I mean there. Our goals, hopefully we all agree, are to reduce energy, reduce water use, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, toxicity, et cetera, the impacts, right? Why don't we make those our goal, right? But instead, we use attributes such as recyclable, compostable, natural, what the hell does that mean? Organic, they're proxies, right? For what we want to have happen, right? We want to reduce the energy, et cetera. But the proxies don't always work. Think about that coffee example, right? There's an example. Recyclable does not always meet our goals. You gonna shoot me now? I'm gonna have to hide after this, okay? Compostable can be worse for the environment, especially if you have someone buy a compostable cup, but there's no composting program, right? All we're doing now is creating more greenhouse gases. Even organic. I know, I live in the country, I know guys who say that organic, in some cases, not every, uses more energy than if they had an integrated pest management system, right? So these things that we're using as proxies are not working, and we know we now have trade-offs, right? So I really hope that what we can do is think more in a systems approach, right? Rather than this end-of-life approach that we have here. So I said I'd get back to discussing and upgrading MRFs. So we saw the data recently on a study that More Recycling did a study with RRS that showed the same thing as what the Cal Recycle saw, which is that the materials that are flowing through the MRFs are not getting where they need to be as consistently as what we hoped. So we know we need to upgrade our technology, but my question is, where should that investment take place? We have limited amount of money, and we need to figure out where we're going to put that money. For example, do we need to collect glass curbside? Saw some great examples of drop-off programs. It has an impact on energy reduction, but it's a lot less than aluminum cans, for example. Almost everything's less than aluminum cans. They're frozen energy. Okay, so what about, and is it worth degrading all the other materials and all the equipment? And you saw what it looked like? Okay, so I think we're asking MRFs to do too much right now, right? But yet everybody wants to be in the bin. Everybody wants to be in the bin. If you go to any of these national sustainable packaging conferences, everybody says, oh, no, we're going to be recyclable. We're going to be in the bin. And we're already asking our MRFs to do too much, okay? So what can we do? I think our primary MRF infrastructure should be optimized to do what it's already designed to do, okay? And allow a secondary system to deal with other materials, right? Let me give you two examples. In British Columbia, they have an EPR program there, and because they control the whole system, they're able to optimize their MRFs. Most of the existing MRFs were modified to only remove paper. Right? That's what they were optimized to do. And then they sent the containers to a secondary MRF. And because they were optimized to get the paper out, they were able to get a cleaner stream of paper, and they were able to separate it better and feed that now cleaner stream into their infrastructure of paper mills up there, okay? They also were able to put more materials into the bin because they weren't asking the MRFs to do too much. Another example is we have in Southern California, Titus Services. It's a secondary MRF. They take the residuals. They use opticals and other automatic sorting to recover more of the materials. The residue, as we've talked about, it has really different properties than what originally enters the MRF. For example, all the large items are removed. Most of the corrugated is pulled out. Okay? So that allows them to take this residual and optimize their system on a more consistent stream of what's in there. They can program their equipment to pull out what has markets and not pull out what currently doesn't. The market fluctuations are less impactful on them. And it allows them to do more types of materials. Maybe we can get into some of the small items with a system like that, because as I said, everybody wants to be in the bin. So I really hope that we can, as collectively, there's some great minds here, it's a great organization, encourage some systems thinking instead of this each person do their own thing and divert 75% by weight. And I'm going to give you a little pep talk here because you may recall Nicholas Copernicus. Copernicus was a mathematician and astronomer. He's the one that figured out the model that we're going around the sun, not the other way around, right? But you know what? He was afraid to say anything because he knew the Catholic Church was going to, get him in trouble because that really went against the teachings of the Catholic Church at the time. So he actually delayed publication of his treatise. I know that all recycling coordinators are required to look at prevention, yet we're not getting any state-level credit for those programs. And waste prevention is much harder to package, and it is very much harder to document. But one thing we can do, for sure, is to try to dampen down that widespread belief that we have a disposal problem and that recycling is the answer. So at least you can take that away from here and stop saying we need to divert things from landfill, because that's not what we need. We need to have things enter the economic system and replace virgin. So I'm here. If you have any questions specific to plastic, I'm around. I'll be here all day. So thank you very much.
It's the right side of the clicker. And waste. My name's Tom Wright. I should give you a little bit of background why I'm up here. Let's see. I come out of the food and beverage business. In fact, I come out of the organic food and beverage business, and which I got into in 1973. In 1979, I was working for a company called Knutson & Sons up in Chico, and they had a mineral water called Eau Santé. And in glass, that was the first flavored mineral water introduced in the U.S. market, and I was a national sales manager. And so I introduced flavored mineral water nationally. That allowed me to get to know the nooks and crannies of the grocery business. And in 1984, I went to work for Crystal Geyser. In 1986, the bottle bill occurred, and Crystal Geyser sparkling mineral water in a PET bottle, same mold they use today, by the way. The mold's 30 years old. I don't know how they last so long. So that was one of the original CRVable items at 1 penny a bottle. That was the carbonated water. The Alpine spring water was introduced that year also nationally. And that was in PET, and that was the first spring water in PET in the United States. That's 1986. There was another brand of water on the market in PET at that time. It was called Avion, and that was the only other brand of water that was in PET at that time. That was in the United States. There was another brand of water on the market previous to Alpine Spring water. It was Cobb Mountain out of Lake County, and it was bottled in PVC, believe it or not. Okay, so I have a background in grocery products. I knew Whole Foods since its inception, since it was called Saferway. In 2002, they accepted a program I had presented to them called the Green Mission. I consulted with Whole Foods for 15 years on their Green Mission. I introduced 9 different regional composting infrastructure systems. I've seen over 50 compost heaps. I've seen close to 75 MRFs. And I still have consulting projects, including what brings me here. I'm here with the Carton Council. There's a famous quote from Einstein that I'm going to paraphrase. You can't solve your current problems from the level of consciousness that created the problem. And I think we suffer still, and I'm going to try to explain what I mean by suffer, from a linear model. And I still think we're still trying to solve for take-make waste when waste itself is obsolete as a construct. In nature, there is no such thing as waste. Instead, in nature, what appears as waste is food for something else. This is known as the cyclic principle. And if you want to remediate greenhouse gas reduction, the simplest way is to keep it in the ground, live off of current solar income. It's not rocket science. The state of California has been very forward-thinking in this. We saw presentations yesterday which were very enlightening of how far ahead the state of California is for the rest of the country. And so I want to say I'm proud to be here. I'm a native Californian. How many native Californians in the room? Just curious. Okay, that's a lot. How many are second generation native Californian? Third generation native Californian? Fourth generation native Californian? Fifth generation native Californian. Okay, okay. So you are from California, understand that California is this moving mass of people coming into our state. Okay, so it's a very fascinating mix of humans, and I think it's one of the reasons we have such enlightenment. But this is the clean way to think about sustainability. Okay, I know in business sustainability means sustainable profits. I understand that. But I'm talking about ecological sustainability, and no doubt those corporations' sustainability relies on the Earth still being here. So, the cyclic principle. It's really important to shift your mind away from linear thinking if you really want to solve these issues. We need to get underneath the way we think that have actually created the issues in the first place. There is no way. Throwaway is not an option. There's no such thing as end of life. I mean, All there is a next life. How many in this room have read the book Cradle to Cradle? Okay, for those who haven't, that's homework assignment. It's really a pertinent book. It's written in 2002, and it's really still very pertinent. The nomenclature is one of the reasons why I think we need to start talking in the recycling and composting and infrastructure business about the circular economic nomenclature. So there's two universes of stuff. There's stuff that's technical nutrients, which glass, plastic, metals would all fit as technical nutrients. All the blends of all those things are technical nutrients. And there's biological nutrients. This is from Michael Braungart's slideshow. He's one of the co-authors. And one of the things I want to be clear is that the living system is that line on the bottom. And he purposely has the biological nutrients integrating with the living system, and he purposely shows that technical nutrients do not integrate with the living system because all they do is persist and bioaccumulate. How many people are familiar with the Ellen MacArthur's Foundation? Okay, this is a little more homework. This is really pertinent. If you want to solve this problem, it is through circular economics. It is through systems thinking. It is at a different level of awareness that we're going to solve these problems. Otherwise, we're going to keep seeing nails and keep solving it with hammers. We're not going to see anything differently. We have to see differently in order to solve this problem. So on the left-hand side is the biological nutrient system. On the right-hand side is the technical nutrient system. There's this little arcing line below, just below the words collection from each sphere, each half a sphere. And there it talks about energy recovery, landfill, and the kind phrase here of leakage to be minimized in British English, of course in the Queen's or King's English. Question. This is done as a symmetrical diagram. In reality, which side is significantly larger than the other side, the left-hand side or the right-hand side? Which is the significant side in which most mass on the Earth is moving through? The left-hand side. We are primarily a biological phenomena still. I know it's hard to believe, okay? But the mass is biological. When you say get organics out of the landfill, it's huge amounts of tonnage, okay? And we haven't even talked about, going back east and where a lot of the compost heaps are all built on the autumn leaf collection, I want to go into the technical nutrient side mainly because I think without talking about it, we're talking about it, that the issue at hand, the leakage, the contamination, the hard to sort, is coming from the technical nutrient side. I know people are going through 1826, and I realize that getting organics out of landfill is not without its issues. But I think it's relatively straightforward, and I hope that we'll solve for it in the next 10 years. I don't know if we're ever going to solve for the right-hand side until we start to bring it above ground, put some sunshine on it, and start talking about it clearly. So technical nutrients are plastics. Paper, if it's recycled, is a technical nutrient. Paper, if it's compost, is a biological nutrient. Those of you who operate MRFs and collection systems, what technical nutrient class has increased over the last 10 years? Can we say it all together? Is this really hard? I mean, this is almost like a denial moment, Are we in denial? Is that why we're having such time solving this? Okay, plastics, multilaminates, okay, it's increased. And we have to solve for it. We have to be smart about it. Okay, I want to go one more slide, and I want to just talk this cascading aspect of the technical nutrients on the right-hand side. So, what this is saying is economically, and this is not Keynesian economics, this is not Chicago School economics, this is circular economics, which I claim is the only economic model. I should have backed up. I have a degree in economics from Revelle College at UC San Diego. So I've been studying ecological economics ever since in graduate school and wondering why everybody kept referring to their things as an economy when it was politics. This is an economy. This is about making things economical. Recycling is the least economical thing we can do with technical nutrients. The least economical thing we can do. The profound thing would be to repair and maintain, reuse and redistribute or refill. In China, they're refilling PET soda bottles, okay? In Canada, Ontario's refillable rate on their 12-ounce beers is 99%.
You can even add a couple decimals.
99%, okay, they're refilling bills in Toronto, okay? I know they say oat, but it's still a pretty sophisticated place. And they're not dying, are they? And are they drinking any less beer because of this? Okay? So there's something about this hierarchy, and then refurbish and manufacture and recycle. We've got so much stuff now, and I guess it's been 30 years since I saw my first MRF, but the last 15 years I've seen a lot of MRFs. And obviously I've seen more and more plastics, and I realized the difficulty of sorting plastics. And I realized the difficulty, even with optical sorters, of sorting plastics correctly by resin code. And having said that, I do think that part of the issue we need to surface is that these things, these items need to act like nutrients in a cycle. They should not act like waste. They should not act like disposal. They need to be in a system that cycles. This will not only reduce greenhouse gases, because obviously if you reuse and recycle and you maintain and refurbish, you're at a much higher leverage than you were if you just saw it as waste. Now, what does this mean to the makers of the stuff? At some level, we've got to put a price point on it. As an economist, I think one of the things that's missing is the cost of all the waste. Susan used a word called entropy. How many people are comfortable with that word, entropy? It's a tendency of the universe to head towards disorder. Okay? If you go to a MRF today versus a MRF 10 years ago, what are you seeing? The tendency of the MRF to go towards disorder. Okay, so you're seeing the second law of thermodynamics play out in front of you. And the only way to create syntropy, in other words, bring it together again, I swear, is to be more concise about technical nutrients definition, more concise about what polymer classes work well together. I don't know why a PET bottle and a PET clamshell couldn't be the same molecule. They aren't. I know they say number one on them, but as you know, you sort of know this is true. But I don't know why they couldn't be, or they couldn't be depolymerized in the same way so they could be reconstituted into PET again. There's got to, I believe in the genius of humans, and somehow we're missing the genius here because we're still designing for waste. We're still designing for the nail that the hammer can fix. So there's another level here that we have to talk about. Multilaminates. I think there's a company now coming out with a single polymer Ziploc pouch, correct?
Ziploc is always been a single polymer.
But I'm talking about the whole system being.
Pouch system, has
yeah. So
not single, but
this is better thinking. Okay, it's a single polymer. Okay, this is the type of thinking that I'm trying to articulate right now. But that's all I wanted to say. I think we're ready for questions now.
All right, we got about 20 minutes. I wanted to, Kevin Drew, San Francisco Department of the Environment, tell everybody in a few minutes or so, or a few seconds, about what you're doing in San Francisco with secondary MRF and everything.
Sure. I think you can hear me. We had some of the same problems that Tim showed and that Susan and Patty. with our MRF, which was built about 12 or 15 years ago and was designed with a fantastic paper recovery system that within the same moment, Craigslist was destroying paper, so that we had a beautiful system that we almost never used. And we suffered through those 10 years of great recovery, but a continuing decline or a continuing increase in the residual. And that was just, it was going higher and higher. It was out of single digits into double digits, heading towards 20%. And in the last few years, we started, we've been thinking about it, trying to figure out what to do about it. The thing that first came to light as a simple solution was one that, well, not the simplest, it was actually very difficult, but Mike Sanders and Titus Systems, who had done some work with our glass systems, had developed a system where he was taking our residual and putting it through a secondary recovery system. Doing what Patty was talking about, how now the material is separated, you can spread it differently, you can put different sorters and different technical machines. I mean, the new evolving technology and the systems was allowing us to get more out. And this seemed like a crazy thing to do. We were shipping MRF residual, in this case, to Los Angeles, because they didn't have a place up here. Well, fast forward another couple of years, and we're now at the point of pretty much installing the systems that he had installed in LA into our existing MRF, which has been quite a little trick. That we take things out, put things in, and all the while keep the material flowing through the MRF. So we're now at the stage where even at this preliminary stage, we reduce the residual by at least half, and it's heading towards maybe 3/4, and we're going to be able to dial it in because we have much more flexibility with the existing system and the ability to add more things in and out as technology comes on. So it's just been, it was really frustrating to be seeing how much material we were putting on the line, but how the residual was continuing to go up, and our disposal was going up because of that.
Yeah, and I think so, a lot of us aren't as big as San Francisco, but I think our hope would be maybe there'd be a regional facility like this where we could send our material, not as far as LA, but somewhere in the Bay Area, and then have them in LA and have them in different parts of the state that you could send the residual.
And we went over to Garaventa and looked at the system there and considered we were going to send, maybe even send some load there, I believe we did, to see how that recovered the continuous line worked. And it worked, but it didn't do enough to make it cost effective. So we continued on.
Questions, comments? Yes.
I have a question for Patty. Patty, I saw your presentation at the Langham Hotel a couple years ago, and you talked about ERFs. So I'm just wondering what's going on with those, and then maybe the commodities prices have pretty much obliterated that idea, or...
No, so he's asking about PERFs, and which is basically a facility that takes a mixed plastic and then does the segregation. And the system had grown until this year. We had seen more of them. But unfortunately, in the last few months, we've seen 2 of them close, one in Ontario, Canada, and one in Atlanta, Georgia, because of the markets, the current market system. I strongly believe that there's a place for PERFs. It may be some combination of PERF secondary MRF, and I think that that there's enough value in the mixed stream. You have to keep in mind that these facilities were the first generation of attempting to do that. So I haven't lost my confidence. We are in a difficult position right now with the growth of PERFs. California needs one because if you look at the data, if we segregate resins, the material stays here and it gets recycled here and it gets turned into new products here, here being U.S. or U.S. Canada. Unequivocal data shows that. So we need to be doing that separation here. Clearly, we're not going to ask the MRFs to do it. So we need some secondary way to do that, whether it's a PERF or a secondary MRF or some combination thereof.
In the back.
Yeah, some of us went on a tour this morning, went to an AD facility. Question arose there about, why it's prevalent in Europe, not in the United States. Pushing towards Europe as, these guys have got it figured out. My understanding in Europe is they recycle what they can recycle, they digest the organics, and they incinerate what's left. Can someone comment on incineration?
It's increasing the rate of entropy. It's seeing a nail and using a hammer.
Yeah,
So is Europe really as forward-thinking as people are holding it up to be?
No. Sorry, Tom.
Once it's burned, it's gone. It's now, yes, you're creating energy, but those materials are gone.
A great way to create disorder. Perfect. I don't know if you've ever thought of what cancer is. You know?
Yes, I have.
Okay. Well, it's E entropy squared. Okay, it's kind of like the wrong thing to do.
One of the things I think the considerations in Europe is they have a lot less landfill space compared to the US.
The other thing, if I can chime in, so I've worked with Gaia and our branch in Europe called Europe. And in Europe, what we've seen is a huge policy shift over the last, I'd say, 10 years. So whereas the policies used to be pushing towards incineration, now policies are really recognizing, whoa, we've made a mistake.
Yeah.
Because now they have this built-in infrastructure that needs to be fed. And they're trying to move towards circular economy, and they're having real conflict with existing infrastructure and their capacity or ability to shift towards a much holistic, healthier economy in the long run, more efficient.
If you think the economics of recycling are difficult, you should see the economics of energy recovery, especially with oil prices so low. Those are just money stocks right now.
Yeah, and I just want to kind of add, in California, right, we have too much landfill space, so it's driven the price down, and that's part of our challenges on the recycling, composting side of things is we're competing against cheap landfill space. So we don't have to deal with that incineration side because that's too expensive, but you still have to feed the beast if you're a landfill owner, and so that's what we're working against.
There are other forms of energy recovery that might work.
Right here, Waste Sleuth.
You made a comment about PET and you can't get it right, and Patty raised her hand. I'd like to get kind of clarification on that. The thermoform versus bottle question on PET.
I think human genius knows how to depolymerize.
Well, yeah.
And Patty raised her hand kind of
Yeah, the
attempting to
problem
answer.
with the PET thermoforms is it's not chemically all that different from, for example, a water bottle. They're actually very similar in their chemical makeup, almost exact, honestly. The problem is that with the PET thermoform packaging right now is that it hasn't been designed for recycling like the bottle. The bottle industry has been working with the reclaiming industry, PET reclaiming industry for years, for many, many years. And that's not true of the thermoform. Most of those are packaged with paper labels and glue and bleeding inks. And the problem is that that the paper labels will redeposit on the flake, and they're not really designed to be recycled at this point. And while we have solutions, there are labels that have been made and designed that will work with recycling. We have this huge retooling that will have to happen in order for that, and that retooling is going to take a long time, or it's going to need a push.
In the back? Oh, sorry. We'll get next.
Again, the problem is the proliferation of polymers. Just way too many different polymers, different ingredients, stretchy, colorants. Okay, and this contaminates the next stream. So basically, even PET bottles. Coke had a plant in Spartanburg, South Carolina. I won't say where I got the information, but the reason they shut it down is because Dasani and Aquafina and Crystal Geyser and Poland Springs PET bottles are all slightly different. And when you go to reintegrate them, if you're just going to flake, you don't get a good second generation bottle. Basically, they had to limit it to 20% recycled content. What I'm trying to articulate is I believe in human genius, and I think we could simplify the polymer family to just those that would depolymerize, or go to the constituent parts and then repolymerize. It's a different process. It's more expensive, but it's less costly to society. Okay, it would mean that the capture of the molecules, it's the molecules, stupid. Okay, instead of losing the molecules.
So I have to disagree with you. I'm sorry. That's not what shut that plant down. What shut the plant down was the technology they were using was a technology that partially depolymerized the surface of the flake, right? And what happened was, yes, all those companies he talked about did put in new bottles. They were much, much thinner, which if you look at, is far better for the environment, lightweighting like that, than recycling. Much more impactful. And in fact, if we would get it out of the tap, it would be even better, right? Okay. So get that out of the way. But what it did was it partially depolymerized the surface of the flake. And when the bottles got so thin, there was really practically nothing left for them to work with. So it was the technology that was flawed. There are people right here in California, we have a couple of companies that are taking mixed bottles and they are converting them into new bottles that are 100% recycled. So it's not, not to say that I don't agree that depolymerization has a great potential. I do. I agree with you on that. But I think we need to have the real story.
In the back, and then I'll continue.
Yeah, question for Susan, please. You speak about the need to increase the payment to the redemption centers. Can that be done within the current framework of the nickel deposit, or does the deposit have to go up?
No, the amount that the redemption centers are being underpaid right now is about $1 million a month. And in a $1 billion program, A, that's not a lot of money. B, I was actually just looking at some of the numbers this morning, and just because of the corrections that were made to the most recent quarterly financial report, the fund balance went up by, I think it was $29 million. So that's sort of like new money that has been discovered in the last 6 weeks that was already there. So you can see how that changed, and the fact that the fund is increasing at the rate of $30 to $40 million a year. And when I say increasing at that rate, I mean it'll be $30 million bigger next year, $60 billion bigger the next year, $90 billion bigger the next year. So the financial accounting has not been stellar, but the money is there, and it's unconscionable to have all these businesses out there that went into business being told they were going to be paid for their work, and they're not being paid for their work. So again, 3 words: fix it. Fix it.
And we were talking about this this morning, and I believe that it can be fixed within the department. I don't think it has to be a legislative fix.
Oh, we're going to go here and then in the back after that. So first.
Just a basic question. Is there just a book that goes over the basics of polymers? And I want to go back to my council members and my residents and try to explain things in simple sound bites, but I don't think I have enough understanding of how polymers work, because they always are perplexed with why. I don't understand why these things just can't be recycled. What is the big deal? And I want to be able to share that in one sentence or less. And I feel like I need to understand it better.
Yeah. No, I know.
You don't have to know anything about polymers in order to explain why they can't be recycled. It has nothing to do with the polymers. It has to do with the logistics of collection and separation. That's the problem. Collection and separation, not the polymers themselves. So technically, all those can be recycled forever, all the time. You know?
But is there a book that kind of,
May I offer something that's been useful to me? So people think of plastics as one big thing, and I find that people understand this when I say this. I say, think of metals. Aluminum is not copper, is not steel. They all have different properties. Think of plastics that way.
And paper, for that matter.
That gets it into like 1 or 2 sentences, right? And that seems to work.
But you're saying that plastics, that different resins act like copper, and another resin acts like steel, and another resin acts like aluminum?
They do have different, no, I'm not making that analogy. I'm just saying they have different properties.
Yeah.
They are not the same thing. You don't just mix them together.
And they add the difference, the aluminum analogy. Okay, so aluminum, it has a little ink on the outside. When it goes to get recycled, that's burned off. with the polymer, with plastics, the colorant is in the molecular structure of the stuff. The colorant is in it. And so is the stretch, whatever making it stretch, whatever making it lightweight. By the way, do you ever remember freezing old PET bottles in your refrigerator? Ever tried freezing a new one? They burst. It's so light. You know, the walls got so thin. And, you know, they really reduced it. Having said that, the issue is more than just the polymer, just more than the resin coat. By the way, the chasing arrows are going off the plastics. You know this? It's going to a straight triangle because the chasing arrows will mislead. Okay? So the resin identity code tells you, I believe it's 95% of the basic polymer in the mix. Is that?
They haven't
In other words,
it's in, if anybody.
the resin identity code is the base of what the stuff in front of you is. It's unlike aluminum, it's not 100%. That's different too. So that's why we're talking about depolymerization, because the extra stuff doesn't do good in the next life. It does. It by definition would create downsizing. You go more to decking than you would to a bottle.
So I think this is like high level stuff that I don't think any of us would say this is the story you tell your council members or your customers. But I think it's very important for us as the experts to understand. I think we're trying to get at some of the logistics of like how facilities work and how the systems work. That's the simple message that maybe the public and the electeds need to understand is like, this is not a material that can like economically or efficiently get removed from the system, or there's no market to sell it to, or it's too expensive compared to the cheap landfilling. So it's the operational things and the markets. That's the story for everybody else. And then there's this higher level thing that I think is really important at kind of figuring out long-term solutions that we wanted to also talk about.
Where can she go to learn?
Yeah, I don't know. Is there a book or is there?
Yeah, there are a few books. I'm happy to send you some resources. If you give me a card after.
If you just Google the phrase recycling plastics and then books.
Oh, please don't Google recycling plastics. There is so much misinformation out there.
But there's there'll be, when you get to the top of the list.
There's some good books out there. There's a lot of really bad.
They're basically, there's textbooks. There's textbook for polymer science.
We can stay and take questions. I do need, Peter Slow reminded me, the plenary starts at 10:30. There's no break. It's 10:30 now. We're going to stay around if anybody else wants to talk more.